right, guess we'll get started. Ibrahima, I'm going to be giving a brief introduction to fault injection, which you guys will hear about later. So first, before we start, I'm going to talk about who I am a little bit, not to, So I'm an embedded security researcher at Cedar Creek Software, specifically the Woburn office, about 2 hours that way. And mainly what I do is I do a lot of hardware and software reverse engineering, and also some vulnerability research on embedded targets. Of course, I went here. I was a UMass alumni, class of 2024. When I was here, I was actually part of the CyberSec Club as a hardware technical director, and I was also a really big fan of CSGS 256 and the Makerspace, which I heard is not over there anymore, which is really sad. But so that's just a little bit about me. Also, the face. Right, so before we actually dive into this, because it gets pretty technical pretty quick, I kind of try to motivate it a little bit. So we want to secure an embedded system. The first thing that you normally look at is like the software, right? Because software is the thing that the user is probably going to use the most. For example, when you're connecting like a camera to like your home network or something, you're going to be interfacing with the software of the camera, not necessarily what's going on inside the camera, right? And so for people who are designing these cameras, a lot of times it's a lot easier to just change something in code, put some new software on there, and do all that, rather than modify like the hardware of the camera, because then you have to get every other camera back and do all this other stuff. And because of that, with software, you kind of make a very big assumption of like, all right, well, we're just going to assume that whatever this is running on is going to work perfectly every single time. The hardware is always going to be fine and it'll execute the code as intended. But what if we just like listen or looked at that assumption a little bit more, right? So what if the hardware didn't work correctly during execution, right? So let's say, I don't know, you're playing your game or something, and then for some reason your game just like stops working because your system stops working, right? Is it the system's fault? Is it the game's fault? What would happen if the system stops working in a way that you're not able to recover from, right? Is it possible to fix it? Is it possible to do anything to, get it to that state? And is any of the bugs that you're experiencing in the game related to how the hardware is executing? And that kind of brings us to the next thing. So who here has played like Super Mario? Right? That's a pretty common game, right? What if I showed you that like you can have bugs that force you to jump super high, That guy didn't hack the game. He was playing a game, they're doing like a live stream or something where he was playing the game. And when he was playing the game, he was just like, why is Mario jumping so high all of a sudden? He's normally supposed to jump like 2 inches off the ground or something, The reason he did all that was actually because the hardware did not execute correctly. It flipped a bit in one of the jump things that was going on, and he suddenly went from jumping like 2 feet to like 2,000 feet. And that's kind of why we want to look at how the hardware executes. And sometimes that can be a promising vector to look at when we're kind of trying to understand how a system works. So now we're going to talk a little bit about kind of the process of categorizing all these faults and doing all these other things. So fault injection is typically used to just introduce like a controlled kind of fault into a system, mainly to kind of categorize what's going on in certain situations, right? So for example, usually when you buy like a product, it's already been tested for a lot of like hardware failure. It's been on for a very long time, right? That's one way of fault injection, just leaving it on for a very long time and seeing if it gets too hot, if it breaks something, if you put too much of this voltage in there, does it cause the system to crash or something else? And a lot of times, people have been able to do this in various ways. Common ways to do it, specifically in electrical engineering, because fault injection is technically all-encompassing term, but in electrical engineering, a lot of times you do overvolting or undervolting, which is just putting too much or too little power into a system. There's also temperature changes. Sometimes you'll just put like a hot gun or heat gun or something on top of the chip, or sometimes you'll put it in like a freezer or something. I know this sounds crazy, but it's actually kind of cool. Sometimes, you can put like a magnet over it and see how it reacts to things. And there's a bunch of other kind of techniques there, but those are like kind of the main ones that I'll kind of talk about a little bit. And they also have various outcomes, right? The hardware doesn't execute your code correctly. Sometimes it crashes. Sometimes it can skip like some instructions. You know, you force it to skip 5 instructions ahead because the clock isn't working. Sometimes you start accessing things that you're not supposed to access because it's going to access like A, and then now you're going to like 3A because the bit flipped or something. And those are kind of the things you want to keep in mind for the rest of this presentation, because those sound like things that would be kind of cool to explore, you know, unintended memory, you know, being able to read something that we weren't supposed to, and also being able to put stuff in there. Do you have a question?
So are page faults more software or hardware related?
Page faults can be kind of both. Usually it just depends on when you're trying to access a certain page. Usually the page, as long as it maps correctly, it'll probably be a software issue, like you're accessing the wrong pointer and that points to the wrong page, but sometimes the hardware has the wrong like MMU or translation and stuff, so that can cause that too. Yeah, cool. Any other questions so far? Right. So, like I was saying, we should keep these kind of things in the back of our mind, right? Can we use that to kind of force this thing to happen, you know? Yeah, of course, right? Because I could just, I don't know, I could just shoot a chip basically and the chip will stop working, right? Or if I just threw the chip very hard at the wall, that could cause it to do something unintended, which is not working, right? But obviously we don't want to just destroy it, right? We kind of want to see how granular we can kind of get with it. So can you kind of do controlled undefined behavior? It's kind of the next question you want to ask. And yeah, it's kind of a hard question to answer. Well, I'm going to say yes, and I'll prove it to you today. Is it easy? Yeah, it's not easy, right? Obviously, what I just said sounds like voodoo magic. Putting something in a freezer to, like, I don't know, read somebody's password or something. Sounds like complete, like, tomfoolery. So you're probably asking yourself, what is this guy talking about? What is he doing yapping up here about how he could put something in the freezer and get my password? Well, I'm gonna prove it to you. So check this out. So 2 kinds of fault injection that I'll be talking about today are voltage fault injection and electromagnetic fault injection, just to kind of set the stage for where we're going here. So how many of you guys have had like those window air conditioners? You know, like you put them in the window, you have to bring them from downstairs or something sometimes, right? Now you notice how like sometimes if you plug your air conditioner in and like you're the only one who turns it on, you know, it's fine, right? It runs really cold, you get really cool, and like nothing's really going wrong, right? And then maybe, I don't know, let's say your brother or sister comes home, they turn their thing on, suddenly all the lights in your house start like flickering. Does anyone else notice that too? All right, good. I thought I was crazy, but that kind of stuff is, you know, it's expected, right? It still works fine, but like for a second or two, you're kind of like, oh no, did we just lose our power or something, right? But now if you notice, like, let's say everybody in your house is running their AC at full blast, suddenly, you know, everyone's cool, but then the power just goes up, right? That's an example of a blackout, right? And that kind of stuff can happen just because you're putting a lot of stress on something, which causes, you know, breakers and stuff to trip. So I kind of want you to focus on like those kinds of things, right? Now I'm gonna put in this logic unit as like kind of a replacement for that, right? So it's kind of similar in the same way, right? If you give proper power to the logic unit, it's gonna work fine, right? Let's say, you know, you're checking if 1 equals 1. Does 1 equal 1? Right? I hope so, because otherwise we're in big trouble, right? So if 1 is equal to 1, then we're good. Now, sometimes, let's say, I don't know, let's say some guy is on the end of it, like turning on and off the power, just like flipping a switch or something. That might cause it to react a little bit differently. So now 1 is suddenly equal to 0. Is that true? No, right? Obviously not. It might cause it to start spitting out some junk, like 1 is equal to 2, 2 is equal to 1,000. 1 divided by 0 is 50, right? That's kind of nonsense. But it's not fully crashing, right? It's still working to some extent. But like, if I just like kept turning off the power, obviously it's not gonna say anything, right? So that's kind of what I want to point out here. These 3 things are kind of the same things that we're kind of looking for in fault injection. Oh, you have a question?
Yeah, wouldn't firmware be responsible
So they can be responsible for error checking, but a lot of times you can still corrupt like the ALU, and if it tries to check for the error, now if you know how to corrupt the ALU, you can corrupt the ALU to say all these other things, right? So that kind of stuff causes some issues here and there, which if you're able to corrupt the ALU and force it to spit out garbage, then you can spit out garbage when it's doing the error checking in software. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's an example. That's a very good question. So yeah, that's kind of why for fault injection, we're looking at this middle one right here. That's kind of interesting. I can get it to spit out whatever I want. Sign me up, you know what I'm saying? So this is kind of what I'm getting at right here, right? You see here on the left, it's like, for example, it's checking if there's like a debug variable or something. And it's like, oh yeah, obviously no, right? Because it's not set to true. So then the ALU will tell the system like, okay, sure. But on this side, this guy over here is going crazy. He's got like demons in his head or something. And then somehow the no becomes yes. And he's like, all right, the system will run with it and it'll use it to execute the software. So this kind of goes back to what your question was, right? The software is just going to read whatever the ALU says. And if the ALU is saying, yeah, go ahead, suddenly it doesn't care what anything else says, you know? So that's kind of our goal here. We're kind of trying to put in some like noisy power here. Oh yeah, what's up?
So it's like a less reliable form of remote code execution.
Kind of. So it's like you're kind of controlling the hardware level in this case of like what could possibly happen, like changing the paths. But that also still requires like a little bit of intricate knowledge, right? Because if you just try to like shoot voltage at a chip, you might kill it, right? But if you know when to shoot the voltage, it's kind of that thing. But yeah, I'll talk about that a little bit later too. So good question. But yeah, the goal is kind of putting noisy power on our system and then seeing how the system reacts to it, right? Does that make sense to everyone? Cool. But yeah, mainly what we want to do here is we want to do this thing called voltage oscillation. I'm going to call it ringing because it sounds cool. But ringing is like effectively like if I got a smooth voltage here and then somehow it starts doing something like this, right? So you can see it goes from being like a pretty smooth line here to like kind of flipping upside down in the sinusoidal or some other kind of like, repetitive shape, but eventually tries to kind of converge back down. This is what ringing is. I'm actually going to prove it to you in the next slide here. So if you look here, we've got like kind of a capture of like me running a glitch on something. So there's kind of a few things here. I'm going to talk about them in detail later. So this yellow line up here is the voltage on our voltage rail, right? And then down here, we've got this trigger signal, which is going to be explained a little bit later, but it's about when we find the thing that we want to glitch, then we just tell the chip or the thing that we're using to glitch, all right, I'm ready to fire. And then here, you can see this blue lines right there. That's our EXT offset, which I'll explain a little bit later. It's just how many cycles from when we fire our trigger to actually glitch. And then the repeat is how long we do the glitch for. Does that make sense, everyone? If it doesn't, don't worry. We'll get to it a little bit later. So you're probably asking yourself, oh yeah, what's up?
So can we use this to potentially use like AES keys or firmware keys?
It's a great question. Yes, you actually could do that. I could talk about that a little later when we get to kind of like how we get into this a little bit, because that'll actually help you do some other stuff related to it. So, good question. But yeah, kind of ask yourself, well, how the heck do you do all this over there? Like, how do you get it to go from being a smooth shape to something like this? The answer is use a crowbar. Oh, wrong one, sorry. I meant this one. So this is a crowbar. Now, I'm just going to briefly explain it a little bit, but it's basically a circuit that acts like a short circuit, right? So what I'm saying is if I basically turn on the crowbar, it's going to take the positive voltage rail and the negative or the ground, and it's going to put them together, and all the current's going to run through there, which if you were a little bit familiar with electrical engineering, basically means there's no resistance on that line, so all the power is going to go through there. And the rest of the system's just going to kind of be like, where did it all go? And then just go away. So now, pop quiz. Does anyone know where the name crowbar comes from?
Do you think Jess involves the last name of the person that figured out this circuit?
Okay. That's a good guess. Anyone else too? All right, so it's actually, if I just threw a crowbar on the voltage drill, it's the same thing. So that's why they call it that. Yeah, I know. It sounds like it's supposed to be some scientific explanation. No, like some guy dropped his crowbar one day and he's like, oh, that's a crowbar circuit. So, fun explanation. But getting back to what we were saying a little bit before, right? We want to put noisy power in at like the right time, right? What does the right time mean? Like this is like, I mean, I could like today, tomorrow, like next year, right? Like what does that mean? And how do we figure out what that right time is? And this now goes to what you were asking about. This is what we call using our side channels. So a side channel is an unintended source of information, right? So I'll give you some examples, right? You ever turn on your computer and then like you start like browsing for stuff on your computer, and then sometimes it starts spinning up like noises on your hard drive and it starts making some like rickety sounds, or I don't know. Sometimes, let's say you're in class and then some kid's computer just like sounds like a jet engine. Do you think he's doing something important? Probably, right? Or maybe not, he might be playing games or something. But you're gonna hear the jet engine and go, okay, that guy's using his computer, right? That's a side channel. In a way, you're kind of just hearing the sound and you're hearing how loud it is, and you're like, that guy's probably running some very intensive thing on his computer. But to bring this back a little bit too, a good example actually is in World War II. The Germans had tanks with serial numbers that went from 0 to the latest serial or the latest tank, right? So 0, 1, 2, 3, whatever, right? So if you just saw like a tank with like 1 million, you were like, oh no, the Germans have 1 million tanks. So you put 1,000,001 tanks ready to fight them, and then you win because you have one more tank than they do. Sounds pretty simple, right? So the British people figured that out, and they were like, oh yeah, so we just put like 10 more, so that way we'll definitely win. And that's kind of how, that's another unintended thing, right? The Germans kind of use it to track how many tanks they've made and which tank belongs to what for the service records, but we kind of just use that to like figure out how many to attack, right? Does that make sense? Cool. So this is kind of what we use to get more intuition on like how we can actually do our fault, when we can put it there, right? Because now if we know a little bit about how a system acts and like some kind of information tells us like, this is when it's doing this thing, we know when to fire. So, like I was just saying, we kind of want to look for something that exposes information about like internal processes. So, good example, how much time or how many cycles it takes to do a task, how much power is coming out of the system, traffic that's coming in and out of the device, you know, sounds. People have actually figured out how to listen to something and tell you what your password is. I don't know how they did that, but it's kind of crazy. And it kind of gives you a good way to precisely target a system. So for example, with AES, you could look at the power traces and be like, oh, that thing's processing an AES key because it's taking too much power, right? And that's kind of one of those things that you want to look for when you're doing side channel. Like, if you put something into the system, does it have like a direct reaction that makes sense? That's it.
So for the keyboard example, and I guess audio key logging, is it just centering the keyboard and then just use the distance each key has from the center?
Yeah, so something like that would be like a good example, right? If I have a microphone here and I hear all the way down there, I press a key, it's gonna be a lot farther, right? So if you kind of like get into a very granular level, you can kind of be like, all right, this guy's on the left side of his keyboard because he's all the way down there and I have to boost the volume this much to get there, right? That's another example. And if you could see that, then you're like, all right, so this guy's on the left side, the right side, his character's 5 passwords, his password is 5 characters, sorry. So it's like, all right, I just brute force a 5-character password, done. So that's kind of a good example of side channel tanks. Now for voltage glitching, what we kind of want to do is the following for side channel. We want to look at the state of our side channel and be like, all right, this is a good time for us to actually try to do a fault, right? So that's what we'll call our trigger. And it's very similar, if you're familiar with oscilloscopes, to if I put a signal high and it figures out what this signal is going from low to high is, that's a trigger, right? So that's kind of how it determines, you know, that's kind of what this trigger thing is. Now how many times it cycles from when the trigger is fired on our device does our thing kind of react and go, okay, okay, now this is when we do it. So it's kind of using more granularity. That's called the EXT offset or external offset. And then the shape of our glitch, which is kind of how the glitch waveform looks, right? You may have seen that there's like that kind of like U shape that I had before. That's kind of the shape that we're doing. And that's a combination of like the pulse width, which is how long or how big our pulse width is going to be in terms of cycles, and or percentage actually, it's a phase offset. And then how many trigger device cycles the pulse should be repeatable. That make sense, everyone? Oh. So, and the last one is the amount of times to try the parameters, right? Because sometimes you're going to see the state of the thing, but sometimes these things will go really fast or really slow, right? It's very stochastic. And I'll talk a little bit about that later because that's a very big thing. So this tries are effectively just, if you've ever taken like a stats classes, like the law of large numbers, eventually you get to a certain point, it's kind of why we're doing that. I'm not qualified to explain it, so that's all I'll say. But yeah, so to do glitching, we actually have this guy right here. This one doesn't have full wires because it's a stock photo, but this is a Chip Whisperer Husky. It's got a lot of wires on it though. And this is an FPGA that effectively takes in some bit stream that tells us, hey, I want to fire this glitch at this time when this signal is processed. I want to wait this amount of seconds. I want to do all this other stuff with it. What's up?
I don't know how much voltage this is. Because if you send divided voltage, you might break.
Exactly. Yeah. So what this can also do is it can sample voltage for you, and it'll act as a crowbar. So what it'll do is it'll limit the amount of power that goes through there. There's two kinds of like MOSFETs on here, or basically there's these transistors that are on there that will take in a certain amount of power and only allow a certain amount of power to go through. So it's more about the current that kind of goes through it in this case. If you can clamp the current down, it won't do too much damage because then the system won't see it, but yeah, but that's a good question. And yeah, so this guy is also very capable of doing a lot of triggering. It can trigger on signals. So it's basically an oscilloscope like in the size of your hand, which is pretty cool. Well, it's not a good one, but I'll get to that later. So this triggers on serial communication, which means if I was to send data over this protocol called UART, I'll explain that a little bit later. If I send the data through there, it will pick it up and be like, oh, you're trying to send a message. All right, I'm ready to fire. So, and yeah, you can use it through Python. You plug it in like as a USB, and you plug it in your computer, and you just write some Python code. And now suddenly you can glitch anything, in theory. So, speaking of theories, we're done with those. We're not going to talk about no more of this theory. You guys came here to see some real action, all right? So we're actually going to go through a live demo, well, not a live one, but I will walk you through an actual fault injection attack that I've done. So this is the Renesys RH850, which is a 32-bit microcontroller that has low power consumption. Yeah, that's not really, this is all not really important. You may have seen the word UART right there. Keep that in mind, that's very important right there. Also the fact that it runs at 16 megahertz is also very important. But the other thing is that you can program it over UART, which is why it says it there. And that is done usually using the Renesys E1 or E2 tools. And in addition to the hardware that it has fairly robust protection apparently, right? I'm reading this right here and it says it's got a one-time password, ID authentication, and it says it will not allow you to talk if it is not allowed to let you talk, right? So we're like, all right, we're gonna go ahead and test this and see if this is true. So now I look at this message over there, right? It says a serial programming connection is prohibited for this device. Response, DC. Someone tell me why now I'm a little skeptical of what's going on here. Like, why do I now think that what it says, I can't talk to this device, I think it's lying to me?
So it's still taking user input.
Because it's still taking user input, that's right. It responded to me to say, nope, I'm not gonna talk to you. So I'm like, all right, buddy, I don't believe you. So now, I'm gonna try to knock some sense, glitch some sense into you. I can't use the other one. So, that's where this guy comes in. And we're gonna try to see if we can mount an attack on there and try to get it to actually talk to us. So, we first started by making our own deck board, which is this guy right here. I wish I had a camera so I could point it, but you'll see it in the photos a little bit later. Basically, it's just a processor. It's got like the crystal oscillator on there, and then it's got two lines directly tapping into the voltage line and other lines too. And what we did is we were able to program it with the tool, and we wrote this basic code to kind of test it. So what we did here is we have this trigger here, which is basically going to send out a signal so we know when to glitch, and then it'll set it low so we know that we went too far. Does that make sense, everyone? Okay. And then what we see here is we set x equal to 100, and in a loop, we're like, if x is not equal to 100, we turn on the line and the LEDs. Now, there's a line on here that we're tapping to kind of see if we get a success or not. It's a different line than the other one. We also have an LED on there. So in theory, if we somehow get x to not equal 100, the LED should turn on. And also wait like, I think that's like 500 seconds or something. Does that make sense, everyone? Does the code make sense? All right. That's basically what we were testing with at first. So in theory, if we glitch it correctly, the lights will turn on, which is pretty cool. So first we started looking at the signals on the chip. There's basically a line that we toggle just to see where our window was going to be. We used a scope, an oscilloscope, to kind of take a look at that thing there. And we saw that it was about 20 microseconds, which is kind of a big window, but you'll see why that doesn't necessarily matter in a second. Right? So our chip whisper at this time was running at around 30 megahertz, so it was sampling at around 30 megahertz, which means every 30 million cycles, I think, yeah, 30 million cycles, it was sampling some of our data. So, every cycle, second sampling our data, and it did that about 30 million times. So, if we take that, we can see that it takes roughly 600 cycles to go from point A to point B in our execution, right? So, basically that means with the chip whisperer, we have 600 cycles to try to hit that glitch, from when we first trigger to when we get to the end. And that becomes important later because now it gives us a set of parameters that we can use. So the EXT offset, right, as I said before, is kind of that distance between when we first get that trigger and when we actually glitch. So we know that we have up until 600 cycles to get to the end, right? And the EXT offset is measuring cycles. So what we did is we just went from 0 cycles to 600 cycles as a delay. And then we ended up pulling it down for roughly 10 to 30 cycles, right? Just to kind of see what exactly is happening there. And then of course, we gave it about 30 tries on each time because sometimes it shifts around. So what we're actually trying to execute or what we're trying to hit may not be perfect. So this is kind of the wiring here. What we did is we just hooked up the Husky to the processor here using this crowbar, which is conveniently attached right here, this line right here. And it kind of just screwed into one of these little SMB connectors on there. And then all we did was we hooked up the lines to monitor it. So we have our serial lines. We have our 2 GPIO lines right here. One which is for telling us when to trigger. The other line is for when the LED turns on because it's also tied to that code. The rest is just power and ground, and yeah, so when we have that, we got ready to try to glitch. And wow, that is time. Okay. So this is basically just going to go through all the glitch values that we have. So it'll create like a combination of all the offsets and everything, and it'll just go through every single one a certain number of times. And then if for some reason we somehow manage to get to 1 on the line that we were looking at, so if the line is set to high, the system's gonna be like, oh, we got it, right? And it'll print it out, it'll tell us exactly what the parameters were, and suddenly everything will be nice, right? So in theory, it should be pretty simple. So now we're gonna go ahead and we're just gonna wait a little bit, you know, maybe we'll go make some coffee or something. You know, it's still hasn't hit, maybe we'll go do some like espresso art or something too, kind of trying to get this in there. And suddenly you realize it's been a couple of days and you're like, all right, this is not hit yet. So something is wrong here. Something else is going on. So we gotta have to reevaluate what's going on here. So we didn't really have success with the process at first. So we were first looking at the triggers, and then this will be a very big bummer if you ever discover this, but sometimes it will not trigger. So you basically were just letting it sit there for 3 or 4 days and collecting dust because it wasn't doing anything. I'm not speaking from experience, by the way. It's never happened to me before. But once we fixed that, we ended up changing some of the other parameters to kind of account for the stochasticity. Didn't really have success with that either. So then we kind of took a look at what was actually going on. So the comparison that we're trying to glitch here is that x is equal to 100, or x not equal to 100. So basically, this set GPIO output is taking me most time, right? When we call that thing, it takes up like probably 590 cycles out of our 600. So if we're trying to hit that glitch, we're gonna have to hit it in 1 cycle. Now, if it's moving around like it's on a trampoline, like bouncing around like a kid on like some sugar or something, you're not gonna hit that glitch. And I have to tell you, that's just because it moves around too much, it's very hard. So you have to let it run for a very long time. Like I'm talking about like months and years. So we kind of were like, all right, let's try another program and see if we can actually do something simpler. So we did something that might actually help us a little bit more. We did kind of the same thing, but instead we triggered on a flash read, right? So what we did was we waited for it to try to read the flash and corrupted the value there. Because if you read from the flash, it's gonna take a very long time. So now we have a lot more time to actually hit the glitch. The big brain. So now we kind of did the same things that we did before. We found the period between the line going high and the line going low. That was our window. This time it was around 30 microseconds. So then we calculated, right? It was the same kind of math we did before, and it's 20 versus 30, so it's up like 300. So we got to 900 here. And then we ended up going a little bit further just to compensate for kind of stuff there. So we ended up going from 0 to 2800 because the cycles on the chip whisper, we kind of upped it a little bit. So it was sampling even faster than before. We gave it about 15 tries every single time. And then we set our repeat range to kind of be the exact same because there wasn't a reason why it wasn't working before. And we wired it basically the same way, so I'm not gonna explain that again. But I turned around to go get water and I saw a success on my screen. And I said, nonsense. So I ran it again and I saw successes way further away. And I was like, somebody's lying. Because somehow I was getting success at the beginning and now at the bottom I'm getting a bunch of successes. I'm kind of like, what's going on here? So it was a Friday, and I was like, this is good enough for me. I'm just going to get ready to go home. So I let it run over the weekend. And when I came back on Monday, I saw this, and I jumped. I was very happy when I saw the successes here. So this means about what, like halfway through our window, right? We found some glitches here. With these parameters, which was great because that now means that we probably found a good set of parameters that we can use anywhere else, at least for the repeat and width. The COS is obviously going to be different because we might trigger on different things. So we can kind of see here, we saw those like ladder ones are very close to each other, and then we saw some of them are a little bit further away. This is the stochasticity that I was talking about, right? So when we set those tries really high, we were kind of just moving around hoping we would actually hit it, right? The glitch is jumping around and it's like flying around too hard, and eventually you swat it and you hit it, right? So that's essentially what just happened here. Sometimes it flies over there, or it's over there, or it's in the middle. So that kind of just gave us like a good confidence that if we were to hit this kind of range right here, we might actually hit it a lot more than before, because we hit it around 3-ish times in the same kind of area. So we dialed in our parameters, and bam, it was hitting with like every second. You'd look away, and there'd be 15 more. It was kind of wild. So that means, yeah, in theory, this should actually be showing up on the oscilloscope with the line being set to high. And that's exactly what happened here. So you see this blue line right here? This blue line is the line that we were monitoring for that glitch. I know it sounds like tomfoolery. You gotta trust me on this one. So you see this yellow line right here is kind of where we did our glitch. The green line was another line that's not really relevant to here. This right here is where we actually were trying to get to go from 0 to 1. So now you can see this line was set to high, so that means our glitch actually worked. And you saw the lights turn on, and it was amazing. So we proved that the crowbar could actually do something to this chip. But now we got to go back to the main problem, right? We actually got to find a way to, show this chip up, right? Tell it that we can actually talk to it. It's not like, we got to stand up to it a little bit. But we're not alone, right? It turns out, oops, I went 2 slides. Somebody actually had already tried to glitch this chip in the same kind of way. So he got his RH850 from I think he went to like a dump or something. This is not like an implication, by the way. He just went to a dump and the board was there. I'm not saying the board was trash, but he got one there and he was trying to see what was going on the board. So he's like, it won't let me talk to it. So he did the same thing. He was like, I don't believe you. So he got this chip whisperer, the same kind of one that we had, and he went and he found a way to glitch it. So he's able to attack it by kind of just attacking the power that was going into the system and kind of trying to corrupt the check here. So in theory, all right, we now know that he has done it. So I can just go download his code, hit run, and boom, I'll have all the data off of my chip, right? Absolutely not, because that's not how it works, right? When you set these things up, sometimes these things are a little more complicated, right? It's hardware. So if I set something up and I forget to connect the ground somewhere, when somebody else gets the ground connected, like sometimes these things can like not be 100%, or if my wire's too long, my glitch might take even longer because now it has to go through a longer wire, right? It might be off of a few cycles or something, because electricity is very fast, right? It's probably traveled the world like 5 million times in the past like 10 seconds or something, right? So that's kind of the point I'm getting at here. So we kind of had to go look at what he did and be like, it was possible, but we have to kind of do it ourselves. So that's what we did. So we had an unlocked board and we were like, all right, we're gonna lock this guy up. We're gonna make sure he can't talk to us anymore apparently, because that's apparently what happens. And we can just do that in the tool. We just tell in the tool, hey, lock this board. We can't talk to it anymore. And then once we did that, we were like, all right, let's figure out how this board is actually talking to this thing. So we did a little bit of reverse engineering on the serial traffic that was going between the programmer and this guy. And we used an FTDI and a logic analyzer to kind of see what was going on. And I made a Python library because Python's cool. So first thing that we see here, it's kind of hard to read a little, but basically we send a bunch of zeros to it, and then the chip's like, okay, stop. Here you go. I'm alive, all right? And then we send the mode that we want, and it sends us like a confirmation to say that the mode is there. And the confirmation of the mode is actually telling us what mode it's in. So for us to actually get into the mode that we want to program at, we have to pull one of the lines very high. Basically, we have to put a signal on the chip saying, I want to be in programming mode. And the chip's like, all right, I got you. I'll put you in programming mode when you turn on. So that's what that's for. And then we kind of have this little basic structure of how the packets work. So we had to figure out how this worked, because obviously we want to be able to emulate this without having to program it. So we looked at the beginning, the end bytes, and the logic analyzer, and we were able to figure out that there's the length of the packet in there, there's a checksum, which I'll talk a little bit about, the parameter, and also the commands and all the other stuff. That's not too important, because I won't be showing all the packets, because we would be here for the rest of our lives. But we can at least talk about kind of the things that we looked at here. So we have this checksum here, which is basically just a simple, here's all the data in the packet up until the end, where the checksum's supposed to go, add them all together, take the 2's complement, and yeah, that's it. That's the checksum. Very simple. So we didn't have to go do any RSA or elliptic curve, reverse engineering. It was just that simple. So just because we had that, we now were able to talk to the chip pretty well once we figured out all the other parts of the structure. So then we went through the workflow of like what the commands were that it was requesting. So the first one was like a register request, which is just asking us for the current state of the chip and all the other stuff, so we know which chip it is. Then we set the frequency that the chip runs at. I think we set ours to about 16 megahertz, so the chip was running at 16 megahertz. Then we had to set the baud rate, or the speed which the UART was talking. So the serial has to match what we're sending there, so we kind of set it to, I think, 1 million baud. I'm surprised it took it, but it actually worked. So it sends that, so that way our baud, or our communication speed is extremely fast, at least in terms of what we normally look at. And then we kind of confirm, because we set the baud rate to be a certain baud rate, we have to be able to change our speed on our side so we match it. So then we send a new command at the new speed to be like, all right, did you get what I said so far? And can I get what you're about to tell me? And if you see a yes, then yeah, that's a good sign. But you see right there, that says serial programming disabled. You guys remember that message by any chance? Like where it might have come from? Right. The chip actually sends that to us if we somehow manage to get it to the state. So we were kind of like, all right, we'll go through the rest of the workflow anyway, but we're gonna keep that in mind. So then once you get past that, we get to the command acceptance mode. So now we're able to go through and be like, here's all the commands, and I wanna be able to send them to you. Are you gonna listen to me? And it's like, yeah, sure. If you can't get past the first message which says serial programming disabled, it'll just keep spitting that out to you. And then there's also an ID code, right? We did see that in the beginning. If you somehow need to send an ID code to the chip, it's way further down, right? Like way further down than anything else. But we still need to be able to at least get to this first check first. So we're not gonna focus on this specifically today. We're gonna talk about the first one. So, like I said before, we're just gonna lock this guy. So we went in the tool, the Renesys programmer, and we were like, lock this chip, I don't wanna talk to it anymore. We turned our heads away. And I was like, okay, if you do that, we'll never be able to talk to it again. That's what it claims. And I'm gonna show you why it's a load, as I would say. So we know how this is supposed to work, right? We now know that if I was to send data through this channel with this specific structure, I can get the chip to talk to us and then tell us that it can't actually talk to me, which again, I think is a load. So we kind of looked at what the other guy had done, and he saw that he kind of attacked this like period of time after this one command was sent, which is the inquire command that we were just looking at, right? And logically that makes sense, right? Because we all saw that after that command was sent, it either told us that it could talk with it, or it was like, nope, sorry, I can't talk to you. So of course we're gonna wanna try to attack that, right? Because that's a good sign that that check is probably happening somewhere around there. And yeah, so we're gonna go ahead and try to dump the flash on this guy, which is what we're doing here. So, like I was talking about before, this Chip Whisperer Husky is actually equipped with a trigger so it can read the data from serial and be like, oh, I recognize these bytes, let's go ahead and fire this trigger, and then go ahead and actually place our glitch. Now, you may not even recognize the command that I put there, and that's fine, because one, this thing is slow. So if I was to set a command and I had a trigger on it, it would have to wait for 8 bytes to show up. So if I put 3 bytes there, if I don't get 5 other bytes until like very far down, it's just like, I'm not doing anything, so you send me 5 more bytes. I think it was a very stupid thing, and they actually just fixed it, like the day before I presented this, so yeah, go them. But because of that, it's very slow, so sometimes it won't actually trigger until very far down in the region that we're looking at. Which is kind of annoying, because then that means you have to go even further back to find a good region to talk about. And because of that, we ended up having to play around with it, and we found these bytes work because this is further up the stream at the end of another command. And so we wired it up. This time it's a lot simpler. All we needed to do was connect our Husky to listen to the serial traffic. So that's what this purple line is. We have the crowbar, which goes to the thing that we were talking about before, which is the regulator voltage on here. And then we also have the reset line, which we use to reset the chip if the glitch doesn't work. Because we got to do it again and again and again until it eventually works. And other than that, it's all just power stuff. And of course, we had to hook in an FTDI here, which is what this guy over here is supposed to represent. And we had to put our transmit and receive lines there so we could actually get the data out of the chip if it actually succeeds. And we're going to use the FTDI to kind of act as the programmer. So we basically just got a programmer from like AliExpress or something. But we made it in our house. So now we need our trigger, and we also need an EXT offset. We already got the trigger, so that's good. But now we need to figure out kind of how far we need to go in our range to figure this out. So what we did as a test was we went from 0 and then we went all the way up to kind of see where the trigger was placed. And we saw that the trigger basically aligned with the response that we got at a very high EXT offset. So this is not set at 0 because, once again, the trigger that we had was way further ahead. So when it actually triggered, we were like super, super far down the stream. So that's why this EXT offset's like 197,000, right? That's how many cycles it took roughly from the chip whisperer triggering to get to that point where the data was actually being sent. And then we get our response at roughly 209,000 cycles after the trigger got sent. And of course we had a repeat from earlier, which was like from 10 to 15. We saw that 10 worked pretty consistently, so we just stuck with 10 and went up there. And then we stuck very granularly, right? Technically you don't have to do that. You really can just go from 10 to 15 because you can't do like a half step. But we just wanted to make sure, you know? So that way it gave us an extra set of tries to go through. Yeah. Does that make sense, everyone, so far? We're all still following along? All right, cool. So we ended up with this glitch loop right here, which is more Python code that we wrote. Basically, if we didn't get the firmware, we keep going in the loop. We go through all our values. We connect to the chip at a certain speed, and then we're like, all right, we're going to go ahead and get ready to fire our crowbar. And then we arm the chip and get it ready to go. And then we say, if we somehow were able to dump the chip, that means the chip whisperer did its job in the background, so we can actually go ahead and just record that as a success. And then otherwise, we kind of just set it up to do it again. And yeah, so once we started doing that, we ran our code and we started seeing these like errors, which are 0xDC, which is what we want because the serial programming disable error is exactly that code. So that means we're on the right track. We can actually talk to the chip and get it to that point that we wanted before. So now we actually just have to sit down and wait again. And then we might actually go make some coffee, or actually we just go ahead and see when we come back, we actually hit the glitch. So you can see here, at the beginning, you know, we were getting some timeouts and we were getting some errors saying that you couldn't send us or talk to us. But if we gave it enough time, somehow we were able to start getting some data back. And we requested all the data off the chip and read all the data off of it. And we did some comparisons and we saw that the first dump that we did and the second dump that we did using the same method got us the code that we want. I call that a success. So basically we confirmed that, yeah, whatever they were saying in the documentation was a complete bogus lie, right? It definitely was not worth it. Under normal circumstances, sure, but we're not normal. So a good lesson that we learned is if you dial in your parameters on another glitch, now you can take that and put it on other things in the same family, right? So you already glitched the chip before. Because we were able to glitch the chip the first time with a certain set of parameters, we took our repeats and we moved that pretty much to where we wanted and then moved our offset around and suddenly we were able to hit the glitch. And yeah, so that's effectively what we have to do. So now the question is, are we done? You guys think we're done here? Like, this is all we had to do? We just dumped all the chip off this, or the data off the chip? Of course not, because look at this. All right, this monstrosity was sitting on my desk for a month. Man, I felt bad. It looked like an archaic mess over there, you know what I'm saying? I pull one wire out of there, this whole thing stops working. You know what I mean? I've also tripped on the cables going in. It was getting hectic, all right? But that's not the worst thing. Look at what the other guy had to do he was like getting deep in the trenches over here, right? He had to like rip out some traces, cut some lines. This is too gruesome, right? I can't even look at this photo. I gotta look this way. So that's kind of like what we want to improve, right? We don't obviously want to damage a chip, right? Because cutting like a board like that, sometimes it becomes extremely hard to, use the chip again, right? And sometimes you might want to use it again, so you probably don't want to destroy it, right? So we kind of have to think of a way that we can do this without like touching the board, basically. Kind of have to get a little creative. So this brings me to the next thing. What if we just start using magnets? All right, so now you guys probably think I'm crazy because I talked about putting stuff in a freezer and now talking about putting too much power on something. Now I'm talking about putting magnets on something. Just hold on a second, I'm getting there, all right? Who here has played Call of Duty? Right? You should all recognize what that is right there. That is an EMP. If you didn't recognize it, I'm sorry, but this is normally, in Call of Duty, an EMP is one of those things that's like, you set it off and suddenly everyone can't see anything, your radar's offline, there's no red dot sight or any of this other stuff. And in real life, it's not as cool, all right? There's different levels of EMPs. Some of them are like that one, which destroy everything. Some of them are kind of like weak ones that just do a little bit. And that's kind of what we're gonna use here. So basically, we're gonna generate an electromagnetic pulse with our own EMP generator, which I'll talk about in a second. I'll talk.
Just like kind of like a aside, but there's actually a technique that they do to human brains called transcranial magnetic stimulation that they use to treat mental illnesses. So it's like a very similar technique actually to this.
So you just shoot like electricity at your head?
It's like they use electricity to make a small electromagnetic field, so like magnetism to make a small electric field inside specific areas inside the brain that are like overactive or underactive to treat mental illnesses. So it's a similar technique almost.
So should I just shoot this at my head when I'm not feeling anything?
Well,
You know what?
You might lobotomize yourself, so be careful.
Hey, there's always a chance. It's stochasticity, my friend.
Mm-hmm.
Right? If I set the triangles hard enough, eventually it'll skip around and not hit my head, But, all right, that's interesting. Thanks for Larry. Thank you for that. But yeah, thing about it is like it's a wireless crowbar, right? It's like I point this at something and then bam, it glitches. Okay, well, that's not that simple. I'll get to that in a second. But speaking of which, this is the Chip Whisperer Pico EMP. This is a $60 EMP generator made with a Raspberry Pi Pico and capacitor, transistor kind of charging circuit, which is pretty cool. But it generates 250 volts of DC power. So if you put your hand over this capacitor right here, actually it's under that shield for a reason, but if you don't have a shield, it looks like this. This capacitor right there, if you touch it when it's charged, you're gonna regret touching anything in your life. You're never gonna touch anything again, all right? Really, it's just, don't touch it. But we now need to figure out a way to precisely place this over our chip, right? We can't just like stand there all day and just keep running this code and just keep pressing this button, right? Like it's a TV or something. Like that's not gonna work for me, right? I got things to do. I gotta go home and I gotta be able to like do other stuff, right? So it's also not reliable, right? If I move it too far away, I might not hit it. If I touch it, I'm gonna be screaming for the rest of the day. So obviously, right, we gotta think of a way to like kind of hold it for us. So that's where the most reliable, moddable, and really awesome 3D printer comes in. This is the Ender 3 Pro, which is the best 3D printer of all time. I'm kidding. This thing literally blew up on me yesterday when I was getting ready to do a demo. I plugged the USB in and it just exploded. I can't use the printer anymore, so rest in peace. But I was gonna do a demo for you guys with it moving around and stuff, but it's okay. But we're gonna modify it because it's that bad. And clearly the only thing it can do is hold something in place. So we're gonna go ahead and do that. So basically, we just made a mount using Tinkercad, which is a 3D modeling software. This guy on the Ender 3. Then we did a successful print on the printer somehow, because that thing is terrible. It cannot print to save life. And once we did that, we replaced the 3D printer part with EMP, and it actually worked. And all we did was we just sent commands from the computer, just move it around. And so, really all we did here was we just connected our EMP to the chip whisperer, and then yeah, I mean, the Pico's technically on the EMP, but I also kind of cut it off, as you'll see in the next one. So you can see here, that's the Pico. It's connecting to this EMP down here. I know it looks very messy, but trust me, it's worth it. This right here is our EMP, and our Pico connect to this to kind of set up the PWM signal to fire it. And then the chip whisperer is still listening and doing the same thing that it was doing when it was back underground. So, does that make sense to everyone? We're good? All right, cool. So now we've kind of added 3 dimensions of complexity, right? The X and Y and then the Z, right? So we kind of need to figure out the ways to like control the probe and do all this other stuff. We also need to figure out how to use the probe and do all this other, being able to actually fire the probe would be pretty nice because that's kind of what we're trying to do here. So luckily we have some Python API for the probe, and we wrote our own library to kind of move the under 3 around just by talking to it over serial. Yeah. So now we're gonna actually basically try to position this guy directly above our chip at a certain spot and try to see where, if I hit it, will it actually cause it to do the same thing that we did when it was sitting on the table with just a bunch of wires coming out of it. So the setup is basically the exact same. All we're really doing is we're just now moving something around on top of it. We changed our repeat to kind of like change how much of the pulse actually gets sent out. Because if you're going through the air, it's going to be you need to have a little bit of a stronger pulse. So then we kind of just probed the board specifically around the chip and got the X and Y coordinates of it and also measured how far it should be from the chip. And then we just kept going from there. And this is our final set of parameters. It basically just went in a square around the chip until we eventually found a glitch. And our code is basically the same thing as before, except now we have a way to be like, this is where I want you to put it. So now in our loop, we just increment it, or we add more of the X, Y, Z stuff to kind of get all that stuff there. And once we got it directly over the chip, it's kind of all we had to do is just put it there and just wait. And wait we did, because look what happened after 20 minutes of this running. It just kept going in squares around a certain spot, and then it got to this coordinate right here, and bam, it just started dumping all the data out. Which means our glitch worked. Which means we're now 2 for 2 on glitches, which is pretty cool. So yeah, not only did we bypass the check that they said was clearly like not possible to bypass, we also did it without touching the chip. So it was basically like I just pointed at it and clicked it, except I wasn't standing there the whole time. And it just shows you that this guy right here, it's only $60, but it can do a lot of work. So that kind of puts us at the end of our journey with the fault injection here. We did also look at some other things too, which is bypassing the ID authentication, which I don't want to talk about because that will take us forever to talk about. We also looked into dumping the boot route, which is related in the same vein. So that way we can kind of analyze the code on there further, which is kind of what we want to do to see if we can find any other software kind of bugs that we can send them. And yeah, and to wrap it all up, there's some more real world examples I can briefly talk about. We've got the Rowhammer DRAM exploit, which is basically, I run some code on a computer that just causes the chip to heat up, and then it'll cause the RAM module to start flipping bits next to it, right? Which can actually cause other programs to now start spitting out some garbage values, which is one of the theories I think happened with that cosmic ray thing that was going on over there. I think that guy was playing it in like the summer and he was sitting there for like 16 hours with like Doritos in his hand, and like the thing was just starting to glitch out, and he thought he was probably tripping, but that's another actual kind of attack, right? Just letting something run for so long and having it super warm can actually cause it to flip bits if the thing is not properly isolated. We have the Xbox 360 reset glitch hack, which allows you to have unsigned code execution in the Xbox bootloader, allowing you to run whatever kind of software you want. I actually have one in my bag, believe it or not.
Whoa.
Oh, hold on.
You just keep that on you?
Yeah, I just brought it with me, You never know when you'll need one, but So this guy is modded here with the reset glitch hack, and I can talk about it later if you guys want. Not, well, after the question section. There's also a PicoFly, speaking of game consoles, that allows you to do this on the Switch. The Switch OLED specifically, which is known to be unhackable because the software is pretty hard. And we also have Replicant, which is a false injection attack on a Trezor Bitcoin wallet, which is used to recover the key from there so you can get some Bitcoins out of it. And yeah, to kind of summarize what we looked at today, we know that false injection is a pretty cool tool. You can, if you use it the right way, you can actually use it to analyze hardware security. You can even get it to start spitting out some nonsense or play whatever games you want. Don't tell them I said that. And the RJ50 can also just be talked to, even though they say you can't do it. If you just use the right amount of, basically going back to that AC thing, if the right amount of ACs are on, I can start talking to anything in there. Now I sound like I'm schizophrenic, but that's kind of the point. And yeah, so that's it. Oh, you have a question?
Two questions.
What's up?
First, can you share the Python library or is it proprietary?
Chip Whisperer one?
The one that you wrote for doing the fault injection.
Oh, well, the Chip Whisperer thing is public. You can use that. The notebooks, I think I can also share too. I'll have to figure out how I want to do that, but yeah, I can definitely take a look and try to share some fault injections in.
Okay. And the second one, what's the best place for noobs like us to start fault injection or other side channels?
That's a great question. So, I recommend reading up on some of them. Like the one I presented, for example, I read up about and then kind of used that to extend my knowledge a little bit. But even just like, I don't know, looking into, I don't know, like getting like a random like deck board, like an Arduino or something, and then just trying to see like, what happens if you safely start touching wires next to it, Normally they say don't put these two wires together, but what if you did, right? I know whoever's taking 256, Ray's probably told you not to do that. Well, I've done that way too many times. He doesn't have to know, but yeah, that's kind of the point. You want to play around with that kind of stuff. You want to see also looking into these tools, right? Like if I just pointed this tool at it and kept doing all this stuff, like what would happen, right? It's kind of similar if you've ever seen like those corruptor tools or whatever that people use like on software. Kind of want to play around with that to see what the effects might be for that, and then try to replicate it with some hardware. Of course, you guys can also ask me any of those questions. I'm more than happy to help. But yeah, for starting fault injection, I definitely recommend like looking at some other resources for that. It'll give you a good idea of how to get the tools and start playing around with that. So, yeah.
Also, to add on to that, we do have 2 people in the club, I think, doing 2 different fault injection projects currently. I think like early stages to my knowledge, but we will be working on those just occasionally on and off in the club room. So if anybody's interested in kind of breaking into this type of technology or like this type of technique, we do have people in the club actively like working on these like proof of concepts or even like new things. So feel free to let us know. We can kind of like let you know when these like project work sessions are happening.
Yeah, I think it was Ohm, right?
Yeah, Ohm, and then we have Ohm 2. Yeah.
Ohm 2, whoa!
Yeah.
Oh my God, that's the best news I heard all day. But yeah, I've also, so Ohm actually worked at Caesar Creek as an intern this past summer, and yeah, he's gotten a little bit of experience with that too, so definitely ask him some questions. He can forward them to me, because I'll always be able to talk to him, so. Yeah, any other questions, or thoughts, anything? What's up?
So, sorry I didn't ask this earlier, but I was just confused about the oscillation of
Yeah.
the voltage. Why aren't you just able to have one voltage and then just quickly like swap to another one? Why do you need the oscillation?
Yeah, so basically what we're trying to do is we're not trying to like, basically if I have this like voltage graph here, if I just like, let's say pulled it all the way down to 0 forever, then the chip's gonna be like, what the heck's going on over here, right? But if I just like, did this, right? I just kept like turning it on and off.
Yeah.
What it would effectively do is it would start like, the power management in the system is gonna not think that it's completely off. It's gonna start going, hey, all right, there's a fight going on. It's gonna think like something's drawing a little bit too much power and it's just trying to stabilize it, right? So what will happen is it'll start overcorrecting by shooting the voltage up, right? Because it thinks something else is drawing so much power that it's causing the voltage to drop. So it'll start shooting out more of this power, which is why it starts to look like that, right? It's more of a nonlinear motion because it's a, right? This is more of a discrete kind of thing, but this is what it would actually kind of look like because it's going to start overcorrecting, and then it's going to realize it doesn't need to do it as much, and it's going to stabilize it down, and it's going to be a continuous signal, right? So it's not just going to go immediately up; it's going to take some time to go up. So, yeah, but that's a great question. I definitely appreciate that. Yeah. Any other questions? What's up?
Do you have any like advice for someone like trying to get a job in this field, hardware vulnerability research?
Yeah, that's a great question. I can definitely talk about it because I kind of started a similar question. So what I normally did was like, I just wanted to like, for example, I found some random stuff that I was looking at, right? Just by going to like Goodwill, right? Like I usually went on Goodwill, today's Saturday, right? Yeah, I would go on Saturdays when I didn't have any classwork, and I would just like drive down there. I'd see what was on the shelf, and I'd like, all right, I'm just gonna grab some random electronics project, and I kind of just like took it apart and I like kind of looked inside. I was like, what's going on in here, right? You know, a good example is like trying to figure out what processor the thing has, right? Like looking at the board and being like, that's capacitor and it's connected to this random black box, right? What is this black box actually doing? So you kind of try to look at the processor, see what it can do, see what it talks to, and all that other stuff. And a good way to get started is like routers is a good way to start here, because routers almost often have like serial available, so you can open up a router and be like, oh, that's serial. I'm gonna try to talk to it and see if I can do anything with that. And then from there, once you get more comfortable with like protocols like serial, learning how to measure that kind of stuff, you'll kind of start to recognize like, that looks like serial traffic when you look at it on the oscilloscope. And then you can go from there and start looking at some other stuff too. So that's what I would recommend. Just like, I don't know, maybe find like a random toy or something that you were looking at as a kid and just like kind of try to open it up and see what's going on in there. That's how I got started. And really, you know, at first I broke a lot of things. There's like a whole bin of things that I have like never been able to use again. And that's just because I, you know, was heavy-handed, but you start to learn, right? You're gonna fail a lot, but if you just keep trying, eventually you're gonna get something to work, you know? So, but yeah, that's a great question. And yeah, and also it's always great to ask for help. If you ever get stuck on something, somebody else has probably tried to do something similar, so if you ask for help on that, we'll definitely
Any chance you can do a giveaway for your broken things?
Broken things, wow. You know, I am trying to get rid of some trash in my apartment. I do have some broken Xboxes I wish I brought. But yeah, I'll think about it. Maybe I'll drop some stuff off here for you guys if you want to play around with it. Now, when I say it's broken, it's because sometimes I've gone a little too far. I like ripped the trace on. But if you're patient enough, you might be able to fix it. So it's always a good project. But yeah, anything else?
So in like 390R, we were talking about something where if you have like a heap vulnerability, there's like and you know write your shell code, there's like a certain chance, like 80% chance that it like works.
Yep.
Something, and in certain cases that's like good enough. And I know you were touching upon this, like where sometimes your exploit won't work like 100% of the time. And I know in like this industry, if you like need to get the data off of some chip and that's like, and it's like the 10% you fail, you might not be able to recover it. Like what percentage are you looking for when you're like writing an exploit?
That's a great question. So sometimes you might just want to do it one time. You might want to just hit it once. And it's like you dump the data off of it and you're like, all right, we're good. We don't have to do this again. Sometimes if you want to run it more than once, like have it more consistent, what you'll probably want to do is try to get above, at least like above like a coin flip, right? So if I like put it there and I run this glitch for a little bit, I don't know, if I dial it in good enough, maybe it'll only take me like 5-10 minutes to actually run the glitch, right? Depending on how fast the glitch takes, how much setup you need to do. So usually what I would look for is at least above like a 60 or 70%. Sometimes it might take even longer than that. There might be some outliers of like it trying to actually hit. But if you can get the glitch to actually roughly around 60%, it's usually pretty good, right? Because now you're flipping a coin on whether or not it's going to turn on or off. But then you have a little bit of like some wiggle room to kind of help out with that. But sometimes we go even higher depending on if you really need something to work. You might be able to dial it even better. So I guess it depends on how jittery your kind of stuff is. But I would say 60 is really a good number for that. And if you can get like any higher than that, then you're probably pretty good. You'll turn it on pretty much most of the time.
Yeah. I don't know if this is like proprietary information for you, but do you ever like get projects where the assignment or the problem's not to like hack into like any device with that chip, but like you're given like a specific device, like we need data off of this.
Yeah.
Then if your exploit like goes wrong, then like that
You have the data
like
to
lost
power
forever.
around.
So does that change like, or how does that change like your estimate? Like if it's like 60% it succeeds, then 40% it just like completely blows up the chip.
Yeah, so that's a good question. Sometimes we've had to glitch things to get them to turn on because we don't have all the required components to turn it on.
Oh, okay.
Because sometimes in embedded systems you might need multiple like boards or something to turn on, but you can sometimes skip those checks and get it to do some other stuff. So sometimes we've had to glitch things to turn them on and get like the things that we need. And usually for those, we'll still try to get like 70%. Because usually, right, if you're running it very fast and it's going, like, I don't know, it takes like half a second for everything, 70% is usually pretty good. Because then eventually it's going to turn on and you'll be able to use it for a very long time. If you have to reset it, then, you know, that's another thing. But for firmware extraction, usually just getting it once or twice so you can verify the dumps are the same is usually pretty good enough. I've had one where I had to glitch it like very consistently over and over and over again every single time it failed. So I had to dump out some data from something and it took like, I was running the glitch basically all day, but I had dialed it into around like 85, 95, or 95%. So it was just like hitting the glitch like every second. And it was playing sounds every time I hit the glitch, so my coworkers got mad at me, but yeah, but that's a great question, because yeah, sometimes you might want it to be very high so you can actually do a lot of stuff. Sometimes it might take a little longer, or you don't really care too much. Yeah, great question. So,
How do you go about dealing with like a more, let's say, black box chip? Because you mentioned you were using a programmer for this Renaissance chip that was like publicly available.
yep.
But not all things that are vulnerable are actually exposed in that way. What is your process?
That's a great question. So, in the case of the Renaissance tool, what we could also do if we don't have it is there's a documentation that they had for their commands, which we could use to just build our own packets and send that kind of stuff there too. And then also the data sheet of the chip itself might tell you some of that stuff. So it'll give you kind of a rough idea of like what to look at, and then what kind of commands you can send there. And if for some reason none of those are available, then you gotta start thinking about where this thing is actually used. Maybe go find one of those things and try to intercept the traffic between them to see like how it communicates normally. And then start looking around to see if you start like, if it can be reprogrammed or something through like an update, right? Does the main chip or some other chip talk to it to like kind of pull the line down and like get it to do that kind of stuff? So that's like kind of like, once you have that black box idea like what's going on, then you'll have to start looking at other things maybe if you don't have any of the other resources. So that's where I would start mainly. I would just at least try to see if there's any data sheet like that tells you the commands, and then if not, then start looking at a board that might have that component and seeing how everything goes there. So yeah, that's a good question, because yeah, I run into that problem quite a lot. So yeah. You have a question?
Yeah. This kind of goes off what Alex was talking about, but if you're like working with like a really secure device, and I know like all the chips are labeled so you can tell what they are.
Yeah.
Is there any weird like security through obscurity technique where they just like remove the label from the chips? So you like don't know what it is, and you have to, like,
Yeah,
figure that
sometimes
out.
they'll etch it off. Sometimes they'll put it in like they'll have like the bond wires on the inside and then a giant like black blob on the outside, so you can't just lift it off because you'll break everything.
Yeah.
There's a lot of stuff like that which makes it a little bit harder to get at, but because it's talking other stuff, right, you can just find like what connections it's making to the other components on the board, and you can kind of scrape them all up and talk to them that way. That's actually a good example, because this guy kind of does a similar thing where you can't access half of the stuff, but if you have the right tools, you can just get under like the die and then you can start poking at certain balls that weren't exposed. So, okay, yeah. Any other questions? Yeah.
How numerous is your Xbox family now?
How what?
How numerous is like your console family at this point?
Oh, consoles. We cannot go there, man. You even think I'm crazy and how many consoles I have. But Xboxes, I mean, I've only got like 7. Okay, I know a guy. I went on Facebook Marketplace yesterday. This guy had 100 Xboxes. All right, they were white. They all just sat in the corner. I'm like, what are you doing? Making a supercomputer or something? Like, you know. And 7. Actually, no, I got rid of some, so it might be less than that. Okay, I have more than 3 Xboxes. So that worked. Yeah. This one's actually blue. Did I show you? I modded this one so when I turn it on, it turns blue.
Whoa.
You guys want to see it?
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. All right. Actually, how much time do I got? Can I like plug it into the TV or something?
I'm not sure if you'll be able to see. We need to figure out the display in the room. So unless you can somehow broadcast in one, which I still think
There are ports, the wall to your right, like
Yeah,
in
but
that
they-
corner, but I don't know if how that really gets streaming, to be honest with you.
Don't worry.
We're not very familiar with the room safe.
I'll try to figure it out. I used to be in this room a lot, so hopefully it's not small.
If you need a cord, here you go.
Oh, they changed it?
Yeah.
Oh.
Let me try. Give me a second.
Yeah.
I don't know.
So yeah, this guy's pretty cool. Check this out. So if I plug this in, boom. It's blue. But if I plug it into the TV, it'll actually do the other side. So that's the next part. I have controllers in here too, if anyone wants to play.
Oh, it is. Oh, maybe. Okay, try that.
Alright, let me see that.
It might work.
Don't worry, it's okay, I can catch. I really hope this works. It's been sliding, catching some dust for a while, so. Is it on HDMI 1? Alright, let's see if this works. First try. Bring on. So, speaking of success rates, oh, what happened there? Sometimes the Xbox doesn't turn on the first try. It's actually glitching it a lot of times. So sometimes it'll actually glitch it. Like it might take 20 seconds to boot because of the glitch, but it's dialed in. So on certain Xboxes, you turn it on and it immediately glitches. So I can explain that a little bit too if anyone's interested. But yeah. Are you sure this is the right one?
I mean, just.
Some minor technical difficulties, I guess.
Do you want to just change it on?
Oh, I was supposed to remove it. All right, well, it turned on, so this time it should show up on the screen. It says it's green over here. Is it on?
No.
Oh.
Well, because the settings don't work
Sorry, create
What do you make sure you want? All right, let's see. What do you make sure you want? Where's it at?
So if you try to zoom
Where's it at on here?
It's like under the desk.
It's like, it's stuck in the last. It's right here.
Oh.
Welcome to CSCS. Excellent.
Oh, man, I dealt with that for a while.
Ibrahima, have you seen the new CS building?
No, I have not. I'm actually very mad. They finished it after I left.
I know. You should go to it after this.
Can I go today?
Yeah, I'm going there after this. It's open.
It's open.
It's open.
Oh, man.
It's cool as
Second
hell.
best news I've heard all day.
Their makerspace is humongous.
Oh, is it not here anymore?
Nah, they moved. The makerspace is like as big as this.
I'm getting old, bro. Man, oh man, I'm getting old. So what's in there now? Is it just empty?
I actually don't know what they're doing in that room. I
It's
just
a
know it's not the
graveyard.
makerspace anymore.
What's
Okay,
up?
it's a student space apparently.
That's what we're pushing for. We don't know what's going to actually happen.
Okay.
Yeah, honestly, it's pretty cool.
You should go. The makerspace is like on the 3rd floor. It's ginormous, and they have like a billion stuff going on.
I'll be there after this talk. Barry, what's going on, man?
Alright, plan B, take longer down the side.
Yeah, any HDMI there?
We have HDMI monitor.
You have an HDMI monitor?
We do.
You do? Where's that?
Alright.
Oh.
Oh, what adapter do you need?
If I have a video.
You want me to grab a monitor?
You have a portable one.
I have a portable monitor, but it's mini.
Oh, we can just bring an actual monitor.
Oh, so yeah, thanks for coming. But yes, the Xbox did turn on. As you can see, it is still there. And if I connect the controller to it, I don't know if it'll actually work. Oh, yeah, look, you can see this light's also blue. If I press this, they should all turn blue. But I wanted to show you the modded Xbox, so I guess we'll wait till they get back. Anyone else have any other questions, I guess? Yeah, what's up?
So is this a full bootloader exploit or on control?
Bootloader. So there's 7 bootloaders on an Xbox. Don't ask why there's 7. But in the second stage of the bootloader, there's a check. And I'm not gonna explain what the check is, so that's gonna bore you guys. But basically, you can glitch it, and it will allow you to kind of chain load some unsigned code in there, which you would write to the Xbox by opening it up and flashing it to its NAND. So what you can do is you can write some unsigned code to that Xbox at the second stage bootloader, and then you can just kind of like install a. So there's multiple ways to kind of glitch it in here. There's the crux of it is there's this one thing called the PLL, which is the phase lock loop, which is kind of one of the clocks on the Xbox. And then there's a post which tells you like what kind of status the Xbox is in. Basically, if you have that post, you can tell what state the Xbox is, which is a side channel. And then you can strike the PLL line, and it will glitch the Xbox instruction to skip over that comparison, so it can load anything you want. So they pass the second stage bootloader, and then the other chains can run any kind of bootloader that they want. So then you can boot any custom modified firmware on your Xbox. So that's an applied example of fault injection, which is pretty cool.
It also helps that the Xbox 360 is like well over 15 years old, so a lot of encryption protocols like DES are like really old.
Yep.
Similar to Nintendo 3DS.
Yeah, 3DS, that's another gun too. It's like, it's because the way that their system, even the DS actually, the DS had, what do you call it? This thing called, so I also, as a side project, do like Pokemon reverse engineering. So you can actually, if you get code execution in Pokemon, you can just overwrite anything because there's no protections. So I could just change certain branches in the game to just jump to wherever I want, which is pretty cool. So.
I've seen people like program Palm to even Game Boy Advance and Pokemon games.
Yeah, exactly. Like you, with that kind of stuff, because of how simple it is and how documented it is, it just works really well. Ah, my savior. All right. Now you guys will believe me when I plug it in. Check this out.
Watch it burn out.
I swear to God. Hey, this is the good one. I remember this one. Or is this the big one or the small one?
I think this is a good one. It's a slightly smaller.
Yeah, that's fine, that's fine, that's fine.
Which one was you showing?
We had a really big one that my friend really liked.
Let me look at the.
I remember he went and bought a Dell monitor just because of how good it was.
But I was jumping over them.
Is it plugged in?
Box.
All right.
Oh, great. Okay.
Is it turned on? Is it kill?
We're very close. You're very close to the first one. I don't know if you still
All right,
have
let's see,
this,
guys.
This, I think, is jail.
No HDMI cable. Hey, you're trolling me, man.
You want a picture of it?
Yes.
Okay, well, I see what's going on.
Oh, let me get the entire.
All right. So,
Let's go.
does it work?
Xbox Live.
Yeah. So, fun fact: you cannot get this on a new Xbox. I actually hacked this. I'm gonna show you something cool. Ready? Watch this. If I press the home button, you see this Proto 242. Don't worry about that. I'm gonna press Y and I'm gonna hold A and watch what it's gonna do. Boom! It's gonna boot into this thing called Aurora, which allows you to run some custom stuff on there. So I actually got legally sourced copies of the games that I bought. As a 10-year-old kid in Springfield, Massachusetts,
Very
I'm going to plug them in, and I think it should just pick them up, right? Let's see, show all. There you go, we got Call of Duty. I can just load up Call of Duty, I hope, when it picks it up. Might have to reload it one more time.
iPhones aren't showing for some
Yeah, sometimes it caches it, so, oh yeah, question?
Yeah, so is that just the equivalent of Homebrew on Windows systems?
Yep. So with this, you can kind of load any kind of homebrew you want. One of the main ones that people use is Aurora, which is a custom dashboard for the Xbox. So it allows you to just kind of run any of this stuff there. Bad string, never seen that one before. You can see I can just launch Call of Duty, and 1, 2, 3, boom. I think it'll load.
Try to count down again.
1, 2, 3.
One more time. Oh, wait.
Yeah, see, there you go. I had to count up this time. Look at that, guys. So you can see it's Call of Duty, and I can actually play it. This isn't like a fake video or something, I can show you that too. I'm pressing X or A, and it's like going through. I can just run through this whole thing.
Can you play online games with us?
You could, but you'll get banned immediately. So Microsoft did not take too kindly to people, shooting voltage at their Xbox for some reason. I don't know why, but.
Could you do custom hosted servers and play online?
Yeah, some people have actually done that. So if you press this home button here, this Proto thing actually allows you to have this thing called a stealth server. So it hides the fact that you're using your modded Xbox to Microsoft, so they don't know. So you can just go online and do stuff that way. Now, you can't cheat because they'll ban you, so don't do that either. But, yeah, so you can see I can run I don't know, let's go to multiplayer or something, right? And this is proof I'm moving this up and down. I'm not faking this, right? I can go to local, I can press the buttons, that kind of stuff. So,
A lot of older COD games, when they're playing with AC, were discovered to have a lot of RCE vulnerabilities.
Mhm.
Is it possible for the end user on an Xbox platform to sort of, port those exploits over if they're able to get control?
So it is possible to do that, but actually, it depends on a lot of factors. So you have to be able to get your custom code on the Xbox. If you can put a custom save game in there, that's usually a good way to do it. That's where a lot of bugs might be. But a lot of times, other than that, you have to find other surface areas. For example, Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, I think, has a custom there's actually a good Xbox thing. So Tony Hawk's Pro Skater, every single one has a bug in it, because if you make a custom part, you can make the part's name as long as you want. It'll just copy the name of the part into the memory. So if there's anything around it, then it gets destroyed. So it can crash the system. But if you can change your name to something specific, you can get code execution and bam. Next thing you know, you can play any game, including Tony Hawk's Pro Skater. So,
Hell yeah.
legally, of course.
On the flip side, the Nintendo Switch 2 is actually unhackable, even with mod chips, because of the new security processors being able to detect certain hardware changes.
Yeah. So right now, the Switch is unhackable.
For now.
For now. It's because we haven't got our hands on it yet. I'm playing, but we got to look more at the security, secure boot enclave there, and a lot of that is they added glitch detection because that's what the Pico fly was to kind of glitch the system. It has glitch detection to prevent all this from being easily accessible. So, yeah.
On the topic of Switch 2, day one, this isn't like full access or anything, but someone discovered on day one, userland blockchain.
Yeah. On the Switch 1 games, right?
No, Switch 2 specifically. I don't know if it's Switch 1, but.
Yeah, I think they use a Switch 1 game and then they had like userland in there. So it's like, that's like a kind of interesting thing because it runs in its own like separate process.
Right.
So you'd have to break out of that hypervisor to get to that one. But if you get that, it'd be pretty sick, you know? That's how they hacked the 3DS back in the day. There was like a game called Field Runners, I think, or something.
Cubic Ninja as
Well, there's that one, but there's a DS game that they used to break out of the 3DS hypervisor for the DS and then break it to the main.
Japanese Flipping Studio?
Oh yeah, that one too worked too.
You can also just use normal Film Studio on a DSi to get
Memory.
I had a DSi on me too at some point. I put it at home today. But yeah, that one's a good one. And like a bunch of those kind of games, they'll have ways to do privilege escalation. Cubic Ninja is a great example. So that was userland execution. That one popped up. Freaky Forms Deluxe was another one. That's a big one. What other games were there?
Pokemon Picross.
Which one?
Pokemon Picross also has that, don't
Oh yeah, Picross, yeah. And then there was the DSi like sound system, that kind of stuff too.
So, I mean, games generally have like no real static protections because most developers aren't really thinking about like, oh, you know, no one's really gonna hack a video game, right?
Yeah.
But since you're running something on hardware, which has kernel access, you know, most devs just don't really think about that. Because I mean, yeah, there's like Pokemon. I saw a video recently about Animal Crossing New Leaf.
Yeah.
That you could send like a packet with that, like an overflow in it.
Good.
That could get RCE.
Yeah.
So I was just thinking, like, just generally, like, most people just not really care about game security because.
Yeah.
You know,
So a lot of times, if it's like not a online game or something, they're not putting a whole security team behind it. So a lot of times with like these indie games like Cubic Ninja or like V with 6 V's, V, that game.
Oh.
Yeah, that game. That also had a bug in it. A lot of these games are kind of indie games. They're not made by like full-on security teams, or obviously not full-on security teams, but people with full-on security teams. So they're not securing the game as much. So a lot of times the security aspect is like a secondary consideration. There's a lot of times where it'll send, like, you might be able to find a bug in like a Pokemon game because they didn't care if you, I don't know, named your Pokemon like 50 characters or something, right? That's a good example. Or some other kind of thing where if you send a packet, like they don't expect you to be able to just emulate like a packet or something. That's another big one. So there's a lot of like surface area with that because of that. Sometimes they do care about it, like for example GTA, they tried so hard every single time to prevent people from hacking the game, and there's still been some bugs and other things, but they are tight down on that because that's an online game. You know, you're actually messing with people's money at that point. So, but yeah.
is this specifically online, or is it referring to more single player stuff like it's in PS?
I mean, mainly online enabled games because that if people are putting their money into a game, like if I'm over here like I don't know, let's say I just roll up and I like download some guy's like script online and like now I have all the cars in the game that this guy spent like $100,000 on in real life money for some reason. And then I'm just like, all right, man, I got all the cars, I got all this money, I can buy anything in the game, right? That guy's gonna get pretty upset, right? He spent his hard-earned money and I just downloaded some tool and it did it for free. And also, you could scam people, right? You might be able to delete someone else's car. So somebody might buy a car in the game and then you deleted it from them. And now suddenly they don't have a car and they paid $1,000 for it. Yeah, that's not speaking from experience, but you know, that's kind of the stuff that happens. So that's why they want to lock that down a lot more. Yeah. Well, yeah.
Are there any consistent differences in the process between getting just a kernel jailbreak versus full bootloader jailbreak?
So like consistent, it's not really consistent because a lot of systems have different protections. So like the PS4, a good example is like you can get userland execution through like a Java script based thing. There weren't really too many save game attacks on there, but there was like a lot of like bad code. You run a website, bam, suddenly you got userland execution. But you had to break out of that. And on the PS4, it uses a different version of Chrome, which uses a different version of the sandbox. On this newer version is of PlayStation 5, it uses a different version of the sandbox. So there's a lot more mechanisms in place to prevent you from jumping out of there. So there's like, sometimes it's not just getting out of that thing, but the way you get out of there is always going to be different. Because there's always going to be some new protection, like also SULinux is a big one, and that kind of stuff.
Have people done like full reverse engineering efforts on the PS4 OS?
Yeah, so since 2015, I've been following. There's a guy named Seater, I think, who did a lot of that. Then there's a couple other guys. An iPhone hacker actually hacked the PlayStation 4. He dropped an exploit for that. And then there's a couple of other guys. Spectre Dev, I think, is one of the other ones. He dropped one of those too. Yeah, there's been a lot of like people researching that. They're still trying to get full custom firmware that you can just install and never have to do all the other stuff again. But that's harder because now you have to attack a co-processor called the Secure Asset Management Unit, SAMU or something. So that one is. They've also used fault injection on that fun pack to try to see if they can leak out any keys in it and that stuff. Which is a good application of what you can do. Because once you get those keys in, you know, it's game over. So, yeah, it's a good question. Oh yeah. Alrighty, yeah, I'm here all day.
So back during the PS3 development, a lot of devs complained about how horrible the process was.
I might join you later. I'm gonna go let's just supply more energy drinks to the room. We'll be back.
Very little game security.
Are you going?
Are there any PS3 related exploits that use that kind of frustration with the cell processor that you can get RC into a PS3?
Yeah, well, RCE, I'm not sure though, but you can get code execution through the.
Well, yeah, not RC, but yeah, just.
Yeah, like there's other OS, which is a big one. This is a feature that they added to run Linux on your PS3, which the Air Force used to take a bunch of PlayStation 3s and make a supercomputer. So yeah, fun fact, you can make a supercomputer with PlayStation 3s, and it actually works pretty well. They use it to crack something too, I think, with like 100 or so PS3s, which is kind of a lot. But
Was it like an encryption method they try to crack?
yeah, they cracked like a key, I think, with 100 PS3s, and it took them, I forget, like a month or so, something like that. Which is actually a very short amount of time, considering how long it takes to crack a key. So that was a big one. And then with the PlayStation 3, there was other attacks too. What was the other big one? 3.15 is when they removed the other OS. So then there's another guy who got like level 1 signing keys for the PS3, GeoHot. He's an iPhone hacker too. Fun fact. I don't know what it is with them. They're all like all over the place, but.
Do they both use ARM?
No, the PS3 uses PowerPC. So it uses, fun fact, the Wii, the PS3, and 360 all run the same code, like architecture, but they're all different flavors of it. So you'll get, this runs the PowerPC also, but it's like Microsoft's flavor. The 360 or the PS3 uses the same thing, and then, yeah. But all of those guys use that kind of same primitive there. The only reason the cell processor was harder is because you have all these APIs called between different processors and all this other stuff too. So, yeah. But I can't think of the other. There's another exploit with memory corruption on the PS3, but I forgot exactly how it worked. It's like a very recent one, which allows you to downgrade it from like the latest on any version. Yeah. And then there's also a 3.55 one, which is very popular. That's what, basically the method for a while was to downgrade to 3.55 using an E3 flasher, which is like a hardware mod, and then you can just install it.
What's so helpful about those older consoles as well is that they don't have electronic fuses that get burned every time
That's
you
right,
firmware update.
Yep, so now you can just roll it back. Like the PS3, you just clip on a chip and then you're done, you know what I'm saying? It's kind of wild. Back in the day, we were allowed to just kind of do whatever, and then they were like, all right, you can't do all this fun stuff. We're going to take some of this away from you. But, oh well, we still figured it out. So. But yeah, any other questions? I can talk about game hacking all day. This is my hobby, you know what I'm saying? Yeah. So,
Are you on the side? Are you part of any decompilation projects?
I've helped out with like the Pokemon ones, like the Poke Emerald I looked at.
Oh.
But I did like some of that, like sound refactoring. Then I wrote one of the tools for the DS ones for the Narcs. I think they changed it recently. And then there's Gen 5 Pokemon hacking is like what I spent a long time doing. So I wrote a lot of tools for that.
Nice.
So that's like kind of what I do on the side. Sounds kind of boring, but yeah. So,
Have you ever written your own emulator?
Closest I got was I took 535 here. I did. I rewrote like a simulator for our own architecture, and then that was like the closest we've done to writing an actual emulator. But I haven't written any emulators myself because there's pretty good ones out there. So really, it's just more about extending them. Man, well, is that all?
Or monsters.
More monsters.
Sort of energy drinks, not just monsters. We have worse things.
Well, cool. Well, yeah, I guess thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming.
Yeah. I'll leave the Xbox here. I actually think I have 2 controllers. Someone else wants to play.
Oh my gosh.
If you want to 1v1 somebody you've been talking smack to, now's your chance. You got MW2 on your team. You can go on Rust if you want. So,
Like Xbox speedrun?
yes, you can speedrun the game if you want.